This is my cousin Keyshawn, my mother, and my cousin Jesse. Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about an event called the Burning of Columbia, South Carolina, which happened in the year 1865 during the American Civil War. And so there's a lot of controversy about who burned it, like how did the fire start, and what exactly happened. So the story basically starts with a man by the name of General William T. Sherman. He was a Union soldier who was coming towards the Carolinas around the time of January 30th of that year. And he had a reputation of being like a very brutal general, and he had basically just swept through Georgia, conquering both Savannah and Atlanta. So he was a really good general, and there was speculation that he was headed towards Charleston. So people in Columbia weren't exactly expecting him to show up because, it was mainly just a safe place to keep a stockpile of supplies and things like that. And so to give you a general idea about the size of Columbia at that time, there were about 8,000 people in the city. And then when the war started up, a lot of farmers and businessmen came into Columbia from around South Carolina. And so the population grew up to about 20,000 people. So you can imagine it was pretty cramped in there. And, there were a lot of riots and looting and stuff even before the general got there. So once the general did get to Columbia, like, there was already a lot of chaos and commotion and stuff, and by then the Confederate soldiers, they fled the city. So they were basically, but the soldiers on the Union side didn't know that yet. So General Sherman had his artillery fire into the city. He fired at churches, and he even fired at the State House. And today you can go to the State House and you'll see these brown stars marking the damage that the artillery had actually done. So you can actually still see the effects of the Civil War. But anyway, so the Union soldiers got into the city and they came across a lot of cotton that was just in the middle of the streets. And the original plan for the Confederate soldiers was to burn the cotton because it was a very valuable resource. So they wanted to take it outside of the city and burn it, but General Sherman came through so fast that the Confederate soldiers didn't have any time to burn it, so they just said leave it there. And there were rumors and speculations that the Confederate soldiers set the cotton on fire before they left, but there were explicit, like it's on record that there were explicit orders from a man named General Wade Hampton III. He was a Confederate soldier. He said explicitly not to burn the cotton because it would cause more harm than good for the city. But even though they were fleeing, they still cared about the citizens who were still there. And so there were some accounts saying that the cotton was on fire, and then there were other accounts that said that it wasn't on fire. But one thing that everybody did agree on was that the fires did start at about in the afternoon of that evening. And so there was a lot of commotion already, and then the fires died down eventually at about 7 p.m. And then about an hour later, around 8 p.m. that night, 3 signals went off. And at this time, the fires were completely gone. Like, nobody saw any fires at all. But at 8 o'clock, when those signals went off, a ton of fires started coming back up, and there's a lot of controversy about how those fires started back up, whether it was the flares that started the fire by mistake, or if the flares were actually a signal to start up the fires again, whether it was by the Union soldiers or by the citizens who wanted to continue to loot the entire city and the stockpile of supplies. But one thing everybody did agree on was that they saw a bunch of Union soldiers carrying torches and running into buildings and stuff. So they weren't sure if the Union soldiers actually started up the fires again, or if it just happened to be a coincidence. And so the Union soldiers, they wanted to find the First Baptist Church, which was where they seceded from the Union initially in 1860. And so they asked the men, where's the First Baptist Church at? Because they wanted to, destroy it and burn it down. And then the man pointed him to the wrong direction, to a church that was known as the Washington Methodist Church, and then they burned that down thinking that it was the First Baptist Church, because the man that they asked turned out to be the caretaker of that church. And so eventually around 3 a.m. the fires died down, and then everybody started to calm down a little bit, but there was still, looting and commotion. And so around, during the morning, when there's light outside, a bunch more Union soldiers came in, and then they actually court-martialed a lot of the drunken Union soldiers, because a ton of the soldiers that were already there were just completely drunk, and they were also engaging in the looting and the chaotic activity. So they were court-martialed, and they got control of the city very fast. And then, so about a third of the city was completely destroyed. There were over 2,500 homes and businesses completely destroyed. And the total amount in today's money would be about $544 million worth of damage done to the city. And downtown Columbia is where it basically happened. And so the Union soldiers left within a few days, and then the citizens basically had to fend for themselves, because a lot of their supplies were destroyed, and most of it was also taken by the Union soldiers. And so you had a lot of farmers and businessmen and newly emancipated slaves who had to come together and work as a community to sort of help each other out. And within a year, they actually started rebuilding the city, and they came together as a community. So I think the story shows that, when people work together, they can accomplish great things even after a really big, horrible tragedy.